like to welcome you to the Federal All Candidates event for the ریچموندهیل Federal Ride. This event is brought to you by the ریچموندهیل Board of Trade with the support of the Rotary Club of ریچموندهیل, where I'm also a board member, and the Toronto Real Estate Board, where I'm not involved. I want to give special thanks to our sponsors, the Toronto Real Estate Board and Cosmo Music, who's provided all of the sound for this evening. The ریچموندهیل Board of Trade represents the business community in our city. Through programs like tonight's All Candidates debate, we like to think we're doing a part of also building our community in general, not just for the business community, but for all the residents of ریچموندهیل. It's our hope that this evening's discussion will provide a forum for everyone to make informed decisions about their vote. It's a great time to discuss the issues that matter to our community, such as taxes, transportation, infrastructure, economic development, the environment, and much more. I'd like to note as well that we have another director of the Board of Trade, Sharon Parenteau, here. There she is. We have some past chairs, Gwen Law sitting beside me, Marge Andre over there, and Councillor David West, I know is here. He's also a past chair, and another local politician, Karen Silowitz, is here as well.
I know my last name can be difficult to pronounce, but you can easily memorize it by remembering the fact that it is translated as cottage cheese from Russian. I came to Canada in 2013, and I'm grateful for the opportunities I got here. Compared to my country of birth, people here are much more free to be wherever they want and to pursue whatever goals make them happy. Unfortunately, the more I lived, studied, and worked here in Canada, the more I have been noticing the erosion of our societal values. There is a growing popularity of movements that claim to fight injustice, but in practice advocate discrimination of people based on their external traits. We are increasingly being asked to tolerate cultural practices that are antithetical to our society's values of freedom, equality, and respect. Our government cares more about the welfare of corporations and corrupt third-world politicians than it does about Canadian people. At the same time, we are expected to give up our Canadian traditions, such as Christmas celebrations, because a small number of people are offended by them. Worst of all, when we speak out against it, we're silenced. I'm sure many of you have noticed this too. I came here today to say, enough. It does not have to be this way. There is a better option. An option for freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. I am looking forward to sharing my and Maxime Bernier's vision of a government by the people, for the people tonight, and to answer your questions. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Adam DeVita of the New Democratic Party.
Good evening. My name is Adam DeVita, and I am your NDP candidate. I am a licensed professional engineer. I've studied electrical engineering at U of T, and I'm not. No, that's never alert, so that's not feedback. Okay. Anyway, software is my complementary skill. In my career, I've written financial analysis and performance software for hospitals, factory automation, and data collection system. I'm a big fan of making decisions based on evidence. I grew up in ریچموندهیل and had my children here. Volunteered one way or another for the past 35 years or more. I have a deep commitment to this community. I also have a certificate in preventive engineering and social development from U of T. This is a sustainable development set of courses. It's about solutions that are good for people, the environment, and the economy at the same time. And I must tell you that the NDP plan to fight climate change is really, really good. It's comprehensive, practical, detailed, will create a lot of new jobs while reducing pollution. New Democrats are offering a new deal for people. We will invest in people, and that will make Canada prosper. It is time to bring dental care, vision care, and drug coverage into the public health care system. Those are the three big components of any health benefits package. It's the kind of thing that many small employers can't offer. I worked in small business for 18 years and had no such benefits. Adding this to the public healthcare system is a competitive advantage for Canada, helps level the playing field when small businesses are competing for talent. It takes some of the risk out of going into business for yourself and is a practical solution to the problems caused by precarious work. The British do this already. It can work. We have a lot to offer. I look forward to discussing the issues with you tonight.
If you like, you can take the microphone off the stand and it's easier. Our next speaker will be Kostas Menegakis of the Conservative Party.
Welcome everyone, and thank you to all of you for coming here. And a special thank you to the Richmond Hill Board of Trade for hosting this important dialogue this evening. I would also like to start by acknowledging that we are in the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence here continues to this day. We thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. As October 21st is rapidly approaching, I can't help but reflect how rewarding the past 12 months have been for me, as my team and I have reached out at every home in Richmond Hill, listening to your concerns. Many of you have seen us not once, not twice, but 3 times at your door. I am both humbled and grateful that so many people share their stories, their concerns, and their hopes for a better tomorrow. It is interesting to note that Richmond Hill residents are quite willing to engage in discussion about a plethora of issues, particularly those issues that affect them, their families, and their businesses. Top issues of particular common interest repeatedly brought up at the door were issues like affordability in the economy, traffic and congestion, immigration, health, the environment, foreign affairs, ethics and integrity in government, seniors, veterans issues, crime and law enforcement, among others. This evening, it is my hope to engage in meaningful and respectful discussion on these and any other topics that may be of interest to you. It has been an honor and a privilege for me to have represented you as your Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill. I've always considered the chair of any elected official a borrowed one, as the rightful owners are the people that gave you the right to sit in it. Tonight, I am asking for your support in the upcoming election so that I can once again be your voice in Canada's Parliament. Thank you.
Let me also start by acknowledging the land and the treaty that we are bound by, and the place that we are holding this event on. Let me also thank Board of Trade and the sponsors for providing this opportunity for us to be able to come together and understand what being passionate about our community means. Over the last year, I've knocked on many doors. Most of you asked me a simple question: why are you running for re-election? My answer is very simple. I ran for re-election exactly for the same reason that I ran 4 years ago. Because I truly believe that the government has a role to bring positive change to our communities. I like to be that agent of change and represent the riding of Richmond Hill. What does being an agent mean? An agent of change is an individual who listens, who takes your feedback, and advocates for you strongly and audibly. We've done that over the last 4 years. We've listened through holding the stopover coffee, town halls, meetings in my office, and coming to you, as well as making sure that your voice are heard to many different media. What is the next 4 years going to look like? It's going to look like focusing on affordability, focusing on environment, focusing on businesses, and also focusing on mental health, something that I'm quite passionate. I look forward to your questions, and thank you. I look forward to your questions and the opportunity to share my passion about ریچموندهیل with you. Thank you very much.
Our first question is on a subject dear to the hearts of many of us, transit. And we'll ask Mr. Storgov to go first. And the question is, will you and or your government commit to federal funding for the Yonge Street North subway extension?
So, the matters on infrastructure, such as subway and urban development, they fall primarily under the responsibility of municipal governments. And I do think that it is an important issue to address, but different communities and different areas have different needs and different capacity for development. They have their own regulations, they have their own processes. So instead of federal government imposing the same rules for everyone, it should allow municipalities to develop solutions that are the most efficient for a given community.
Okay, so this is going to work out to yes in the end. However, how we get there is a little bit longer. One of the things that I've been pushing within the party is our particular transit policy. We believe that people in Ottawa shouldn't be playing SimCity with ریچموندهیل or any other city across the country, and we believe in local leadership. So the New Democrats have committed, just like we did 4 years ago, to fair allocation-based funding to the cities that is stable, predictable, and that the municipalities can plan on. So ask Ms. Selovitz or Mr. West, if that's the project that they want to fund, it's their money to spend it, how they should be spending it.
Absolutely. Yes, you will commit to fund the subway. Has made that announcement. It is in our platform. We are coming to the table. The provincial government in Ontario was the first government in Ontario's history to recognize the need and put the money on the table, and a new Conservative government in Canada will support it unequivocally. We need the subway in Richmond.
The answer to the question is yes. And let's talk about what has happened over the last 4 years. In the last 4 years, what we have done is work with the government of Canada, with the Liberal Party, and make sure that there is $36 million funding allocated to ریچموندهیل so the study could be completed, so the total cost of the project could be developed. We've also advocated for over $300 million. Now, the most important thing is the region of Europe has identified Yonge subway extension as their #1 priority. The region has done its job. The federal government has come with funding. We're already at the table. We need the provincial government to step up and actually sign the deal and make sure that $10 billion shortfall of the 28.5 could be answered so we can have finally the subway coming to ریچموندهیل.
Our next question, we'll have Kandida start off. Considering that the national security of Canada is a top priority, I'm sorry, this question is intended for a specific candidate, and As we mentioned, all questions go to all candidates, so I'm going to ask a different version of this question. That being, what is your position or your party's position on the Iranian government?
What? The government of Iran?
The Iranian government.
Wow, that is a complex diplomatic answer. That's a little bit of a loaded question because it's what is our relationship should be with the Iranian government versus how do they repress their own people or rig elections or things like that. So their government of Iran does abuse human rights and it is a problem. However, the right way to engage or not to engage with human rights and using country is a little bit more complicated than can be done in a 1 minute thing. I'm not going to be taking leadership advice from Mr. Trump. So, yeah. So, engagement, where appropriate, we're always going to be advocating for peace and trying to figure out how that can happen.
There can be no dialogue with the Iranian regime today. They are one of the They support non-terrorist organizations. They are backers of the Assad regime in Syria. They repress their own people and throw them in prison. They cannot voice their own opinion. I bring to your attention a bright lawyer. Her name is Nasrin Sotoudeh. She's a lawyer. Spoke out, among other things, to be the voice of women in Iran, to have the right to go to a soccer game, to have the right to not wear the hijab if they don't want to. And like the judicial system in Iran do, they sentenced her to 38 years in prison and 148 lashes. No dialogue, and the hijab is the
I think that's a fair question to ask, especially when we live in ریچموندهیل and over 12% of our ethnic community consists of Iranian Canadians who are seriously concerned about the government and the regime and their families back home. There's no doubt that our government made a promise back in 2015 that we will move forward with the normalization of relationship with Iran. Having said that, we have approached the dialogue not as a means to please or appease. We've approached the dialogue with a means to be able to highlight many challenges that was already mentioned by other members. Dialogue is a means to be able to communicate and highlight those injustices, not a means to appease.
Same question, I assume. So, I think that the right approach is to take a balance. So we definitely should not ignore all the human rights abuses and corruption that is going on. At the same time, if we interfere into Iran's internal affairs, is that going to make things better? Look at what happened with the United States and Iraq. Sure, Iraq did not have the best human rights track record, but once the United States started introducing different sanctions against Iraq and even invading it, things got even worse. So we should prioritize persecuted people in Iran and try to help them as much as we can, whether through refugee programs or assist the Iranian community here in Canada. But we should not also be interfering in their internal affairs.
Our next question deals with healthcare. When it comes to setting priorities, where do you consider healthcare of any importance, especially owing to the crises of mental health, opioids, and fentanyl? Constance?
Thank you. That's an important question, and one which has come up at the door quite often. Our Conservative government believes that the federal government has to always come to the table with respect to proper funding to the provinces for healthcare. Our leader, Andrew Scheer, has made the announcement that we're going to continue in the spirit of what we've done to date, to continue to support the Canada Health Accord for transfer to the provinces, providing predictable increases, incremental increases annually from one year to the next to ensure that provinces have the proper funding to be able to provide health care. We work closely with our provincial partners across Canada, and we will continue to do so as we have in the past to ensure that Canadians get the best possible health care available anywhere in the world. Thank you.
There are 4 pillars that I'm focusing on. Affordability, environment, small businesses, and health, specifically mental health. As a mental health parliamentarian champion for 2018, and the MP who tabled a private member bill in the House of Commons that unanimously passed, I am committed to make sure that the right amount of funding is allocated to healthcare. First 4 years, $10 billion. $4 billion for senior home care and another $5 billion for mental health. I'm glad today all levels of government and all parties are talking about mental health and the impact that it has in our community.
The fundamental problem with our healthcare system is that for years, the federal government has insisted that provinces satisfy a certain set of arbitrary conditions in exchange for transfer payments. But these transfer payments don't even necessarily go towards healthcare, they just go towards the provincial budget. These conditions, they discourage innovations and it causes unnecessary bickering between Ottawa and the provinces over who is responsible for the current mess that our current healthcare system is and how much more money we need to throw at it. What our party proposes is to stop interfering into this provincial matter and allow provinces to implement the solutions that work best for them. That means if in Ontario mental health is the most pressing issue, then Ontario should focus on that. If cancer is the most pressing issue in Nova Scotia, they should focus on that. Allow provinces to implement their own solutions.
So to start off with, New Democrats are proposing that we expand the public health care system to bring dental, vision care, and a drug plan to be part of the public system. This is going to be a massive amount of effort, and it's going to be an extremely important thing. Dental care alone is, emergency room visits happen because dental care is not covered right now. So it makes no sense that your mouth is not covered unless you're going to die and you need extremely expensive surgery. We're blowing at least $100 million a year because people aren't getting the preventative care that they need. We're also wasting a lot of money because people aren't getting the drugs that they're supposed to be taking because they can't afford it. And not only that, we can save billions of dollars by changing the bargaining position between the giant companies and you individual consumers and a public purchasing power.
Our next question deals with ownership and the fact that the scarcity of affordable housing, both for ownership and for rental, is reaching critical levels. Do you have any immediate solutions? And we'll start with Najib.
Thank you. Great question. As a father, I'm concerned about the fact that my children cannot afford to buy a house in Richmond Hill or anywhere in the GTA. What has our government done over the last 4 years? Has introduced a new home buyer program, which allows the government to support 10%, up to 10% of your down payment, allows you to withdraw $35,000 of your RRSP, and if you and your spouse or partner make less than $124,000, you automatically get qualified for $480,000. It's been enhanced in the new platform, so for areas such as the Greater Toronto area, you can get qualified for up to about $800,000. We have a plan. The plan was introduced and is now enhanced to address some of the challenges.
Right now, one of the main drivers of high housing costs is excessive immigration that the current government has introduced. A lot of immigrants are settled in Toronto and Vancouver areas where the housing supply cannot keep up with demand. And that's basic economics. When the supply cannot keep up with demand, the prices grow. So our party will reduce immigration to sustainable levels from 100,000 to 150,000 immigrants per year. So this will make it easier for housing market to keep up with demand and allow the prices to go down. And also part of responsibility for high housing costs lies with the municipalities. Excessive regulations and long approval processes contribute to the costs of the housing. So for example, in Vancouver in 2018, keeping up with regulations for construction companies can add up to $644K to a cost of new house.
So New Democrats have a comprehensible affordable housing strategy. It's more than just building affordable housing, although that is a big component of what we plan to do. And cooperative housing, of course, is a big component of that. Remember, at Richmond Hill, 80% of the people waiting for affordable housing are seniors. So this is also a seniors poverty issue that's worked in deeply with it. New Democrats plan to bring on a new foreign buyers tax. This would apply to people that aren't citizens and don't live here. We intend to also bring in a registry of ultimate ownership, so it becomes impossible to hide your money and your speculation behind shell companies and things like that. Under the leadership of British Columbia's NDP government, as an example, we are going to leverage their efforts to really crack down on money laundering and organized crime. Because part of that problem with inflation and housing prices is the mob hiding money.
First thing we're going to do is cut your taxes. Conservatives believe that in your pockets is better than in the pockets of government. Liberals introduced a very ineffective stress test, very restrictive, make it very, very difficult for people to buy their first home. We're going to revisit the whole stress test process, and certainly we have plans to eliminate the stress test for the second time and third time home buyers, which makes it even more restrictive for them to move up and allow the next generation to purchase their first home.
Our next question is on the environment. What new legislation would you suggest to ensure Canadians have the right to a healthy environment, including clean air, water, food, and healthy ecosystems? And we will start with Igor.
Well, I think the first thing to look at is how much carbon dioxide we actually produce. And the answer is we produce a mere 2% of global carbon dioxide emissions. And yet, we're still being asked to cripple our energy sector and our economy by imposing carbon tax on citizens or stopping building the pipelines. In the meantime, countries like India and China are allowed to continue to pollute freely, and they get $100 billion a year to develop their technology on top of that. So, to make our environment clearer, we're going to prioritize practical, non-alarmist solutions, such as bringing clean water to the First Nations, stopping buying oil from countries that violate human rights, and develop our own natural resources. These measures will allow us to make the world greener.
Well, the New Democrats have an extremely comprehensive environmental plan, and there's no way that you can read it all in 1 minute, let alone just hit the highlights. So, of course, NDP.ca/commitments, there's tons more details. We have specific proposals for clean water, of course. That goes beyond just investing in the needed infrastructure to actually provide clean water for all Canadians. We approach a right to know philosophy. The public has the right to know what is going on and what pollutants are actually available. Or available, being produced near them. That alone is a very non-intrusive nudge that has incredible effect, because companies don't like to be on the bad guys list that are polluting all their workers' environment near their homes. So it's also terrible for their customers. So the very act of publishing information leverages people to do better.
Well, the first thing we're going to do is eliminate the ineffective carbon tax. We have a real plan for the environment, and it's incentive-based. First of all, we're going to provide incentives to manufacturers in their processes to meet greenhouse gas emissions, so they can update their equipment and reduce their carbon footprint. The second thing we're going to do concurrently will be to provide a retrofit program so that every single Canadian homeowner can update their system of their house with a new furnace or a new roof or a new thermal windows, so that each Canadian household can reduce their footprint. The third thing we're going to do is provide incentives to manufacturers of equipment so that we can export important technologies that can help people around the world and other companies around the world reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
So let me tell you what was the first thing that we actually did. We acknowledged that climate change is real, and we are at the crossroads. We accepted that fact. What did we do second is we took leadership. We took a balanced approach. We made sure that the economy and environment goes hand in hand. We made historical investment in infrastructure, in transit. We made historical investment in making sure that our small, medium-sized businesses are focused on green tech. Yes, we put price on pollution because that's the right thing to do. However, we provided the rebate, and that rebate went into making sure that you could reinvest that into green opportunities. We're going to commit to net zero emission by 2050.
Adam, we'll start with you next. And the question is, what is your party's plan to achieve a balanced budget within 4 years?
So I'd like to start off by pointing out that every NDP platform since the mid-1990s in Ontario and at the federal stage has included a plan to balance the budget. Yeah, I'm right and you're wrong. Now, New Democrats recognize that the economy naturally goes through ups and downs. If you look at your economic history, you will see there are periods of recession and there are periods of boom. It is natural to run a deficit when people are out of work and collecting public supports because you don't want to turn a recession into a depression. So, we will balance the budget over a 10-year cycle. During that time, we plan to reduce the ratio between the GDP and the actual debt. Now, right now, we're facing a climate crisis, not a budget crisis. We need to invest in actually fighting the climate crisis.
We had a balanced budget in 2015. And promises teeny little deficits of $10 billion a year. $75 billion in the hole 4 years later, ladies and gentlemen. He's now promised an additional $100 billion in spending, additional $100 billion to be added to the deficit over the next 4 years. Runaway deficit with no sight to balance. We will cut taxes, we will create jobs, and we will have a balanced budget in the 5th year. It is part of our platform. Conservatives have done it before. We will do it again.
I'm sure that no one is in this room does not believe in fiscal responsibility. We believe in balanced budget. However, the point is how we're going to get there. Are we going to get there through austerity measures and cuts to our services because we want to cut taxes? Or are we going to invest in our community? Are we going to invest in our infrastructure? Are we going to invest in our environment? There's no point having a balanced budget if you're not going to have an environment that you'd be able to live. Yes, we are committed into balancing the budget. The approach and the timing is different. We don't cut services, we invest in people because that's the right thing to do, and that's the smart thing to do.
We have several plans for balancing the budget. First, we're going to abolish corporate welfare. We spend $29 billion a year on business subsidies, yet just under half of them improve economic performance. We're also going to defund CBC because you should not pay for government-sponsored propaganda. We are going to cut foreign aid, except in response to humanitarian crisis, and focus on our economy, or focus on Canadians, because we have to clean up our own house before we help the others. We are also going to explore the options to make the government smaller and simplify our taxing system, because Canadians spend $7 billion a year just to keep up with the tax demands and to make sure they are tax compliant.
Before we continue, I would just remind everyone we are extraordinarily fortunate to live in a democracy where we have the ability to hear from our candidates, to make informed choices, and again, to be part of a respectful, productive process that allows us to pick the leaders that we feel are best for us. I will remind everyone here that booing and shouting out is not acceptable behavior for this event. Thank you. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. We will start with you this time, Costas. The question is, what would your party do to protect and expand trade opportunities with the United Kingdom after its departure from the European Union?
Well, we are known as the Party of International Trade. The previous Conservative government signed 43 free trade agreements with international partners around the world. We will sit at the table with Great Britain and other countries around the world to explore the possibility and forge good, strong economic working relationships with our partners around the world. What we will not do, we will not sell out Canada's interest by not being at the negotiation table, as we saw with the latest USMCA fiasco, where Canada ended up at the table in the very, very last minute and basically said, sign on the dotted line, or there's going to be an agreement September 30th, whether you like it or not. That's absolute nonsense. We believe in engaging in meaningful discussion with our partners around the world and expanding Canadian markets and Canadian businesses on the world stage.
We have to trade because we need access to the market. The Government of Canada over the last 4 years has opened up that access to over 1.5 billion people through negotiation and finalization of CETA, which is agreement with the European Union, as well as the Asia Pacific, excluding China. We have successfully negotiated version 2 of NAFTA, depending on the term you want to use. However, if and when it comes that we have to negotiate separately with UK, we will do so as we have done with other countries, making sure that Canada's priorities and benefit is kept in the forefront of our mind.
Our main priority in any trade negotiations, not just any negotiations, not just negotiations with the UK, when we deal with any country, we have to ask ourselves, how will this trade agreement benefit Canada? So I think as long as we keep this goal in mind, then we will be able to efficiently negotiate with any country. And part of why Canada is not so attractive for international agreements right now is the government monopoly on dairy products, meat and poultry. It was because of supply management and dairy cartel that Canada failed to establish favorable positions in NAFTA negotiations. So part of our plan is to abolish dairy cartel and supply management. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm still skeptical whether Britain will actually leave the EU or just kind of repeat our very long-term, well, we'll see what happens after the next British election. First of all, we're not going to be running to Brian Mulroney for help. Second of all, New Democrats do believe that we should be creating trade agreements with other countries. Canada, right back from the fur trade and early Confederation, has always been a trading and exporting nation. However, we do need to defend Canadian interests when we do so. We have a lot of traditional links with Great Britain, which is great. Now, I want to point out that supply management gives Canadian consumers stable prices. We don't get random doubling the price or bankruptcies of farmers. And it also gives farmers a fair price based on their cost of production. The assertion that we're somehow getting ripped off is a little bit wild.
We'll begin with you, Richard, for the next question, which is, what is your party's plan for dealing with our Indigenous community?
Great question. As you know, at the outset of 2015 election, our Prime Minister and our leader of the Liberal Party of Canada said no relations is more important to him and to his party than the relationship with the Indigenous people. Let's first of all acknowledge that the Indigenous people have gone through many challenges and injustices over the last 100 years. Let's also acknowledge that they haven't been compensated. And let's also acknowledge that we've lost trust. Building trust and building cooperation takes time. And that comes with making sure that we are equal and contributing and respectful partner in this journey that we have started. We have made historical investment for the Indigenous community, for their health, for their education, for clean water. Yet, we have a long, long way to go. A journey of 1 million miles it starts with the first step, and we've taken that first step.
We cannot rewrite the past, but we can seek to live together harmoniously in future. And one way to do that is that we will seek options to replace the paternalistic Indian Act, which keeps the Indigenous people in the state of dependency on the government and allows to control most aspects of their lives. We want to introduce a new legal framework that guarantees equal rights and responsibilities to Aboriginal people as Canadians and promotes self-reliance of communities. We will further explore the ways to promote the establishment of private property on the reserves in order to empower its residents, because the lack of real private property or services is responsible for the poor state of housing and social ills that are present right now in Indigenous communities.
The Democrats believe that the federal government should not be able to pick and choose which Indigenous rights they will uphold and which ones they will ignore. A new framework for reconciliation must be grounded in the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, which sets out minimum standards for survival, dignity, and well-being for Indigenous peoples. In partnership with Indigenous peoples, a new Democrat government will fully implement the United Nations Declarations of Rights for the Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliations Commission's 94 calls to actions. We will work with Indigenous peoples to co-develop a national action plan for reconciliation, drawing directly from the calls to action and the declaration to ensure that Canada's laws, policies, and practices are consistent with the human rights commitments. That is stop sign?
The Conservative Party supports the reconciliation process with Indigenous peoples. The Conservatives are focused on bringing forward policies that make real, measurable improvements in the lives of Canada's Indigenous peoples. Achievable goals, working in partnership with the leaders in the First Nations communities across the country. It's one thing to talk the talk, it's another thing to walk the walk. There was the previous Conservative government that apologized for the residential school trauma that prevailed here in Canada. We are going to sit down with our leaders in the Indigenous communities across Canada. We will work closely with them to ensure that every community in Canada has clean water, that every child in Canada and every Indigenous child in Canada has the same rights to an education, to healthy food, to healthy water as any other Canadian living from coast to coast to coast.
Which is, how do you advance ethical behavior among elected politicians and stop any corruption, whether real or perceived?
Could you repeat the question, please?
How do you advance ethical behavior among elected politicians and stop any corruption, whether real or perceived?
Well, I think the first thing that we could do is stop firing the people who speak out against corruption. And recent corruption scandals in the government also had to do with the crony capitalism. Like I said, we're going to abolish corporate welfare and stop giving out handouts to corporations. So there will be less room for corruption in government because of that. Finally, I think that we should introduce harsher punishments for politicians that got caught in corruption. They shouldn't just get away with apologizing and then carrying on business as usual.
So one of the old-fashioned tricks that prime ministers like to use is to make sure that the ethics commissioner reports to the prime minister's office instead of to the parliament. So you end up with situations where good to go from the PMO means, well, we've agreed on what lies we're going to tell to cover up the situation. The Senate is, of course, a big problem. We're in favor of abolishing that. And there is a version of cronyism that is institutionalized in our government that we have to really look at. For example, the hiring priorities of election officials, there's actually party lists that you can submit, and that gets you a better hiring preference than the general public. This is an anachronism left from a long time ago, similar to the Prime Minister being able to appoint his best fundraiser to the Senate, and then you can go around giving speeches and stuff like that. We have lots of proposals that basically summarize like this. We have an officer of Parliament that reports to the Parliament, so that you can't hide information.
What we've seen over the last 4 years has been abysmal. We saw a Prime Minister in his office who tried to instill his will on the independence of the judiciary, SNC Lavalin fiasco. We have in Canada today the only Prime Minister in Canada's history to have been found guilty of ethics violations, not once, but twice, by an independent officer of Parliament. Twice. He also threw out his Attorney General when she said, no, this is wrong. We start by all working together, ladies and gentlemen, and it starts on October 21st. With your help and Canadians across this country, we can throw out Justin Trudeau and bring back some respectability.
Transparent, accountable, and oversight. We need to make sure that all our elected officials are fully transparent in their activities, whether it's commitment to the community or fundraising or the position that they take vis-a-vis the bills that they're entering. We need to make sure that they are accountable. We need to make sure that the oversight to the Ethics Commission remains effective as it has. Thank you.
It's been reported that many wealthy Canadians have moved money offshore and created strings of trusts and companies to avoid Canadian taxes, yet still live in Canada. What will your party do to rectify this unfair situation and the loopholes that caused it?
Okay, so there's several parts to the answer to that question. I touched on this earlier. A statement of a registry of ultimate ownership does help close loopholes. The other thing is that we know that a lot of tax evaders exist because they are published in the Panama Papers. But unfortunately, the CRA has had auditors laid off and not funded properly to actually go after the tax cheats and bring them to justice. After all, tax evasion is an actual crime. So let's go after the criminals. We also have, so this is strictly on tax evasion. Right? Anyway, so we do have proposals to actually make our tax system itself more fair and more transparent. And I'm going to run out of time, so I won't get into it. So, thank you.
The Income Tax Act is there to provide fairness in the income tax system for everyone. We need to provide the resources to Canada's Revenue Agency so they can properly investigate all taxpayers, whether they be living in Canada or not. For those that do not live in Canada, which is what the question is, we should provide additional support to CRA by giving them the legal right to be able to go after those people. And the way you do that is by having bilateral agreements with nations around the world, bilateral taxation agreements where people are forced to disclose their income, not only in Canada, but outside of Canada. That's the only way that we can really identify who they are, where they are, so they can pay their fair share like every hard-working Canadian citizen does.
Tax evasion is wrong. In our country, we need to make sure everyone pays their fair share. Because at the end of the day, we live in a democracy and we look for equality and equity. Now, our tax structure and our tax system is very complex. We need to reassess and reevaluate the whole tax system. And it takes a strong government to do that. Our government over the last 4 years has taken the first step to do that, and our commitment over the next term is to make sure to go after companies that they're using offshore and trust funds to be able to avoid taxes. We've made the investment, historical investment on CRA, and we'll continue to do so.
I think one of the best ways to stop the tax evasion is to simplify our tax system. Because when the tax system is simple, it is more transparent. When it is more transparent, then it is harder for businesses to evade paying taxes. And also, when it's easier for everyone to keep up with tax compliance, then businesses have less motivations to use offshore funds. Also, we plan to reduce taxes on business to promote individual entrepreneurship. And again, when you raise taxes on business, the big companies just back up and go. But when you reduce taxes, you'll try to come back.
Next question, we will start with Costas. And the question is, Quebec has legislated a ban on any and all religious dress and symbols to be worn by Quebec public employees. What is your party's position on this?
Canada is a beautiful country. It is a place where people have come to live and call their home from every nation around the world. We are known as the beacon of love, acceptance, support, and tolerance. My position and our party's position is that every Canadian should have the right to represent themselves, speak any language they like, dress the way they like, to go to work, to stay at home, to participate in Canadian life, respecting and loving what they consider their home culture. There is no room in Canada for intolerance. We are the party of inclusiveness. We are the party of acceptance. We are the party of immigrants and immigration. And I would never, ever, ever support anything other than acceptance and inclusion of all Canadians as equal Canadians. Canadians are Canadians, period.
In Canada, our Charter of Rights is the cornerstone of our democracy. Multiculturalism, inclusivity, diversity is what we believe in as Canadians. Our Charter of Rights tells us that we could, so long as we respect others, practice our religion, speak our language, promote our culture. When any of those are taken away from us, we need to make sure that we take a position. Our federal government is waiting the outcome of the court challenge in Quebec. And once that outcome is there, if needed, we will intervene. Thank you.
Well, it's true that our country has freedom of expression enshrined in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We also have a separation of church and state protected by our Constitution. So I think the question is, does the wear of religious symbols in public workplaces constitute a violation of that principle? And I think this is a valid discussion to have. So we should not jump straight into the accusations of bigotry. Also, I find it ironic how nobody spoke up when Christian religious symbols were removed from public spaces, such as Christmas decorations during the celebrations, or Supreme Court of Canada banning a city hall from opening its sessions with a prayer. But now that it affects certain religious symbols from a certain religion, now that it's catastrophe. Why is that?
So the tradition in the NDP is there's basically one kind of vote that's going to be guaranteed to be a whipped vote. And that is a vote that is on human rights. We will always stand up for human rights. And it is obvious that when Quebec preemptively invoked the notwithstanding clause, they know that they're breaking the charter. They know that this is an issue of freedom of religion and freedom of expression for people. And we can actually have secular institutions without imposing ourselves and the secularisms on the individuals who are actually working in those institutions. None of you guys were converted to Hinduism by Jagmeet Singh wearing a turban. Also, it's ironic that some of the arguments in favor of this are about freedom for women. But sabotaging and stagnating the careers of women who would be otherwise in the workforce is a lot worse than forcing them to choose what to wear.
Our next question is business related. How will you protect Canadians from scams, fraud, and corporate data breaches? And the example given with 3 exclamation marks after it is Equifax.
Well, how do we protect Canadians from cybersecurity? What we have to do, we have to make sure that we invest in businesses who are focused on our security, on our data security, because big data is becoming the result of us moving very rapidly in a digital age. So investing and protecting our data is the responsibility of the government. But how do we do it? Is working with small businesses and working with other organizations to develop the necessary tool that's needed to be able to protect that data.
Well, first thing that I can think of how we're going to protect Canadians' data is I look at Europe and I see that they have a very nice law in there which is called the right to be forgotten. That means that any citizen in Europe can can ask a company to delete their data completely. We don't have that in Canada, and I think this would be a good law to implement. Second, I think that the problem is not so much with the sharing of data, but the purposes for which data is shared. And I think that we need to ban companies from sharing users' data if it's not necessary for the function of their business.
So 4 years ago, I would have been telling you people about Bill C-51. The New Democrats are for the freedom of people. We've always been standing up for the consumer and for people to have the protection of their own privacy. There's a lot that can be done here in terms of protecting Canadians' data, standing up to basically exploitation by big data, and recognizing that the internet giants are not some kind of special breed of company that is different and more wonderful. They've just got bigger and they're in a new kind of industry. So, yeah, I think that actually he did make a good point there. The right to be forgotten is something that we should look at in a serious way. Also, net neutrality. It's a very important thing to defend net neutrality so that other startups can come and compete and do so in a fair way.
The brave men and women of our police services work incredibly hard to keep us safe. We owe them a debt of gratitude, but we also have a huge responsibility as a government to ensure that they have the right tools to be able to do their job properly. A conservative government will continue to work very closely with law enforcement agencies across the country, ensuring that they have the right technology and the right tools to be able to identify, investigate, and bring to justice those that choose to perpetrate a crime on Canadians. It is abysmal that there are so many seniors in this country today that are being scammed by cybersecurity and by these people telephoning them at home. We need to put a stop to this, and the best way to put a stop to this is to support the brave men and women in our law enforcement agencies across this country.
Our next question deals with the environment. How would your party help communities prepare for and adapt to the effects of climate change, including flooding, drought, fire, food security, and species extinction?
First, we should acknowledge that climate change is nothing new. There is no denying that climate changes all the time. And climate change is not necessarily negative. Sometimes it can be beneficial. Until 12,000 years ago, much of Canada was under ice. And it is thanks to natural climate change that we're able to live in this country today. So, we can help communities adapt to the effects of climate change by investing into the infrastructure and, like I said in the beginning, allow the municipalities to decide which solutions will be the best for them to implement.
Okay, so the first things first. The problem isn't just climate change, it's rapid climate change. Yeah, the climate has been changing for over the course of the Earth's history, but we're talking like a degree for 1,000 years, not a degree in 100 years or 50. And the acceleration of the pace is the big problem. I would rather not have to be swimming in the citadel of Halifax, although that's a bit high of citadel. But you get the point. I want Halifax to stay above sea level. We want to work with municipalities specifically to deal with the problems that are their problems. Every city is different, so you have to work locally with a local solution to harden our infrastructure, say, you know what, we should be building on floodplains. The definition of what a major storm is, a 100-year storm is what it used to be. It's more frequent, we're going to end up with bigger, harder climate change events. And we're going to do whatever we can to help fight climate change.
Let's begin by acknowledging that climate change is real. It's a real problem. It's something that's affecting people all over the world every single day, including today. We need to put the resources on the table for our first responders when it comes to floods, fires, effects of climate change all around the world. I've had the misfortune in my life to have been left homeless, albeit it wasn't a climate change situation, it was a massive fire when I lived in Montreal in the 1960s. It's not fun to be without a home. It's not fun to be without clothes on your back. It's not fun to be on the street on January 24th in your pajamas and no shoes. That's when the government has to come to the table with the funding to ensure that our first responders have the right resources to be able to attend to the people and the families anywhere they are, in the country or around the world. It's only a human thing to do. It's the best thing to do.
Well, it's great to be finding the acknowledgement from all parties that the climate change is real. Now, how do we deal with what is ahead of us? We build resilience. How do we build resilience? We build resilience by investing in our social infrastructure that's taking care or being challenged by this rapid and unpredictable environmental impacts. We also build resilience in our homes because that's where we feel secure. Historical investment in ریچموندهیل in dealing with infrastructure, social infrastructure, as well as in next government, next mandate, over $40,000 of interest-free loan for homeowners to build that resiliency. Our community is taken care of, our home is taken care of.
First-time homebuyers are the ones most affected by roadblocks to qualifying for a mortgage. How do you ensure this is overcome?
Sorry, how do we ensure?
How do you ensure that this roadblock is overcome?
Well, we have a comprehensive affordability program. You're going to have to go to NEP.ca to get the details because it's actually a huge, huge program. There's a combination of things because there's one thing to buy, but we also have a rental crisis in this country. Like if you look at ریچموندهیل, rentals themselves, the vacancy rate has been below 3% for decade after decade. You've got, just yesterday I was talking to a senior, and her rent was more than what my mortgage used to be. Like, seniors are getting a single bedroom place, $2,000 a month? Really? So we do have an affordability plan for people that is comprehensive across much more than simply helping people bargain up the price of houses. We've got to take the speculators out of the market. We've got to get, frankly, money laundering out of the market because that's also going to reduce prices. We do have some plans to help first-time buyers amortize their mortgage in a more clever way where that's useful.
We
We start by leaving more money in people's pockets. We cut taxes. We provide incentives. We have a very comprehensive and detailed plan that leaves money back in people's pockets. People are struggling today. Even in a community with by other standards across the country like ریچموندهیل, which is considered somewhat affluent compared to many others, the number one issue I've heard at the door after door after door has been the issue of affordability. People are living from paycheck to paycheck. There are some very sad stories out there. If we want our youth, our young people, our young families to be able to afford homes, we need to leave more money in their pockets. If we believe the conservative philosophy is simply this: you are the best custodians of your money, not the government. We need to give the tools for everyone to be able to take their own money.
So what did we do? We cut taxes on the middle class as the first step that we took. And guess which party voted against it? The party that now is claiming that cares about people, cares about the middle class. How do we make sure that housing remains affordable and our first-time buyers would be able to get into the market? We make sure we develop a comprehensive and pragmatic solution, and we also make sure that we adjust that for where there is challenges with the real estate prices, such as GTA. As I've said, we have introduced the first-time home buyer program, and we also acknowledge that it needs enhancement when it comes to areas such as GTA, such as Vancouver, and large urbans.
I agree with what Costa said. We can make housing more affordable by cutting taxes, which is what the People's Party is also planning to do. On top of that, we want to scrap the carbon tax completely. So that will also bring the prices down. And as I said before, we're going to make immigration more sustainable, so that there is not as big of a strain on the housing market, so that the supply can keep up with demand. But I'm not sure that the first-time home buyer program is such a good idea, because when you give incentives, then it removes the incentive from business to reduce their prices, because they know that they're going to sell either way. So why bother with making their product more affordable? And that applies to housing too.
That's right. Our next question is, what would your government do to promote education in technology so we can be leaders of the fast-moving advancements in society?
Oh, okay. Well, that's easy. We make investments. We make investments on innovation. We make investment on small businesses. We remove red tapes. We make sure that the priority and the support under our government program are there to foster innovation. And this is exactly what we've done. Historical investment under Strategic Innovation Fund. Historical investment by making sure that there are tax cuts for small businesses. We've introduced even more tax cuts for small businesses who are focused on green technology. From allowing them to write almost 100% of their cost of capital allowance in the first year, to also tripling the amount of write-off for other business-related expenses. What do? We invest. We don't cut.
Well, one of the things that we can do to improve education on the federal level is, so as a university student, I go to campus daily, and the Canadian campuses have been taken over by the leftist culture of political correctness. On campuses, students are taught that white men are responsible for all the ills of this world. They are taught to be victims. Personal responsibility is shunned. So I think that we can make a great improvement to our education by encouraging students not to view the world through the lens of victim and oppressor, but to try and understand how they can improve themselves and make the world better in process.
So my first point is more of a generalized point for education and higher education. New Democrats want to make the Canada student loan interest rate 0. We shouldn't be earning billions of dollars as a government by underfunding education and then making students pay interest on student loans and having a big profit. New Democrats also believe that our plans and our future, as we transition away from burning fossil fuels and into a clean energy economy, is going to have serious implications on our workforce. We have a comprehensive plan to make EI better so that people can still collect EI should they go back to school or need to retrain. For sector-specific jobs, because after all, students are more likely to go into a field if there's actually work there. The government has a plan to both fund education and in clean technology renovate buildings so that there's actually jobs in the fields to do the needed renovations and fight climate change.
Let's begin by talking a little bit about the Liberal investments. Here's an investment. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce reports there were 131,754 federal regulations on the books when Justin Trudeau took office in 2015. They have invested an increase of 4,300 new regulations, curtailing businesses, startups, technology startups, investments in technology, more red tape, not less red tape. That's the Liberal record. In fact, in 2018, the Financial Post reported that the regulatory burden now in Canada is killing Canada's competitiveness. What we will do as a Conservative government is cut the red tape, giving access to new technologies and investment in new technologies to the people that know how to do it best in the country, the innovators, true Canadians, Canadian entrepreneurs, Canadian business people.
The provincial government has failed us miserably in dispersing mental health funding. How can you help grassroots organizations like Treasure's Thrift Shop and Home on the Hill, who have helped the seriously mentally ill?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm ready to go.
Yes, I can. The provincial government has failed us miserably in dispersing mental health funding. How can you help grassroots organizations like Treasure's Thrift Shop and Home on the Hill, who have helped the seriously mentally ill?
I think that it is a provincial jurisdiction. It is the provincial government that has failed miserably at providing the adequate health care for the patients in the province. So if you want to change that, you can elect a different government.
So naturally, investing in our public healthcare system is a high priority for New Democrats. Our provincial government has also failed us in another way, and that is making a complete mess of how autism funding is done in Canada, or actually in Ontario, by changing the system to a system that had nothing to do with needs and then changing back. Now, the people that need stability and consistency most are people that need autistic therapies. New Democrats are actually going to work with the provinces to create a national framework to solve that problem so we don't have this kind of catastrophe over again. We will, of course, invest in community-based solutions because we believe, this is one thing that's different about the NDP from the old parties, we believe that federal government action is best done through local community organizations because you people out in the communities know more about what needs to be done here than a guy in Ottawa.
Mental health is a very serious problem, and the Conservative Party is committed to taking serious action on this file. The previous Conservative government made significant investments to help address the issue and to encourage a dialogue with all those affected to find solutions. We created the Mental Health Commission of Canada and provided funding of $240 million. The previous Conservative government also allocated $5.2 million to support research in treating depression with a focus on suicide prevention. Canada's Conservatives will continue to take strong action to promote positive mental health. We take the issue very, very seriously. Many families are affected. I have friends in this room that have family members with special needs. This is an issue that we will continue to monitor very carefully and certainly be supportive as a government as we have been in the past.
So at the outset, I'm going to ask for a bit more indulgence from the monitoring group. 1 out of 5 deal directly with mental issues. 4 out of 5 are indirectly impacted. Our economy is impacted to the tune of $50 billion a year because of issues related to mental health. I'd like to acknowledge Mandarin and many community-based mental health service providers in New York region and Richmond for the great work that they've done. What have we done? In 2016, I, along with my colleagues, lobbied for allocation of $5 billion over years to mental health. Sorry, I gotta go on that one. This is something that I'm quite passionate about. I apologize, but give me another 30 seconds. $190 million.
Actually, you're about to have 2 minutes for your closing remarks, so.